No slides. Sorry. No slides today. We thought we'll open it out to you guys for some Q&As and wherever you're feeling blocked. Tom, you and Shadi have both added some things on the chat, so we can look at that a little bit more. And I know Peter has been also looking at quite a bit of the technical stuff. And then we've kind of done some improvements on the eval script to kind of make sure it's a little bit more consistent. And hopefully by the coming few weeks, we are also going to ship a little bit of UX improvement. So it's a bit easier to use. I know many times I hit run and I realize that I haven't put the input column in. So hopefully now we'll have a little more ease of use and highly, we can do more complex things with it. Tom, particularly, I know you're also looking at costs quite a bit on this. So hopefully the eval works well once your RAG piece also kind of turns up. So we'll open it out to you guys.
Well, I have two
Yeah,
short
sure.
little small demo things just to show off. Where did that go? If I can get my screen to actually show the entire screen. Um, So in particular, you guys had rightly brought out of we really don't want these run URLs basically showing up beyond the workspace. And so for everybody that's in an enterprise workspace, sometime in next week, if you send a URL to somebody that's not logged in and a part of your workspace, they'll see this. And if they're logged in as somebody else, they'll see this. So in much the same way that if you try to access a Google Doc that you don't have access to, you get a little message that says you need access, and it tells you a little bit about how to get that. Um, that's basically coming. So thank you guys for that feedback. Peter, I know you were, rightly concerned about that, but anyways, so we're doing our best to try to address that as fast as possible. And then as we mentioned, there's some good stuff happening on the eval sense on the side. We're just trying to improve the usability of those tools, and to basically just make it easier to ensure that all of the variables can be added in there. But we're not quite ready for that demo. We'll show that off next week. But I know, hi Gokul. I know, Shadi, Peter, Tom, Dan, as Amika mentioned, happy to open it up to some questions in places where you think you guys are blocked.
Cool. Can I start?
Please do.
Okay, thank you. I will just try to be quick. Just 3 points I want to talk about is in the web version of the chatbot, of the health chatbot we developed for IOM. There is this just icon saying by IOM Tunisia, and when we click on it, it has a hyperlink that takes me to IOM website. I just thought also if this same icon can take me to like a PDF file that is hosted online that the person can read the terms and conditions. How are we able to do that? Not right now, but in the future. If how can I host like a PDF that is accessible, that has this terms and condition use, instead of having by IOM Tunisia? I don't know. Maybe we can keep by IOM Tunisia and have another icon saying terms and condition of use, where someone can click and they can have all the details. This is point one. Point two is about, as I mentioned today in the WhatsApp, talking about like it's a bit controversial when we like to have to humanize the chatbot reaction, and also it's the line is really thin. We don't know, and also not to be very empathetic, because I had a feedback from our specialists in gender-based violence. When the person is writing, "I'm pregnant," it's not all the time you need to say congratulations. At some point, the empathy needs to be different, or just at least you need to be neutral. And if the second user is really pregnant and happy about pregnancy, it's nice to say congratulations as well. So it's how to humanize it, and also in a way not to be very rude with some people. I'm really happy to get your feedbacks. It's maybe better to be in the safe zone and to keep it neutral, totally neutral, no human interaction, or try to develop it more. And the third point I wanted to
Can we
just
address
highlight.
the first two, Shadi, and then we'll get to the third
Oh,
one?
sure. Yeah.
So this should be clear, but we proved this. So this little icon that you see here, that link,
Yeah.
is defined by whatever you put here, right? So you can change that. So if you upload a PDF to a Google space somewhere, that will yield there. We have considered adding Markdown support so you can embed links in here. We haven't done that one yet. The other thing that you can do is in WhatsApp. I mean, you can have one of the default questions that you see here on the web just be, hey, what are the terms and conditions? Right. And so, it's just like literally terms and conditions. And then you would just update your bot to return the terms and conditions if you really wanted to there. And then on the WhatsApp side, and I don't have an easy way to demo this, there's the ability to add these little slash menus so that when somebody does slash, you can build a menu, right? That like help or find local clinic, or it basically sort of pops up this thing. We can do a walkthrough of how to do that. There's a little bit of like WhatsApp configuration, but it's pretty simple actually. So those I would think about like those default commands, right? So the default commands here are just in these conversation starters on the web. Um, and then actually I can show you. So if you go into WhatsApp, it's sort of buried inside the WhatsApp manager. You can't do it inside of GUI. You have to do it inside of the stupid Facebook UI. But actually I will just show you. So like this is your number. And so if you basically go in here and click this, and then click on automations, you'll see that you have these little commands and icebreakers. And then we can just add those in. And then those are just interpreted like any other message that the user would send. And so then you just account for those in your bot, but this is where they then pop up in the UI.
Okay, that's clear.
And then Ambika, do you want to try to do the personality one? I have some thoughts given our recent we've been working with the Susan police. But once if you go first, Ambika, and then I'll try to find this relevant share that.
I sent Shadi a link. I'll just open that as well. I mean, it's not directly related, but perhaps it could be useful. Second. Are you seeing my screen? It says Gen.AI community chat. Yes. So this is more of a bot just we made on one of the group chats that me and Dev are part of. Dev is our CTO. And they had a lot of strict kind of ideas of the community rules, which we just added like point by point into the prompt. And usually and I think we also mentioned this to city team, but they are not here. But I mean, even so, the idea is that if you are detailed enough in your prompt about the instructions of how it needs to act towards certain people, you can even give it steps that first understand the situation of the person, and then say that, okay, this is how you need to react if the person is sounding distressed. This is how you need to react if they're elated. So those will definitely make a difference, because now these models are they do fairly well with that. In fact, I think we are on 4.1 for most of you, so I think it will be very easy to do that. And then test it, and then just iterate a little bit on top of it. You don't need to run a eval for bulk because it's a smallish kind of request. But I think that would really make a difference without having to put too much effort. That you can just say, put a header that says your behavior, and then kind of figure it out based on step by step. And as you're improving the bot and testing it in the field, you may have more points that you want to add to that as well.
Yeah. just
John,
as
shall I? Sorry. Yeah.
No,
Go
just
ahead.
as another, can you allow me to share too? I'll just give you one
Yeah.
other example that I think may be super relevant, Shadi, which is so like we've been working with the Susan City Police Department. So this is a telephone number, and I'll share this one as well. Um, this is basically, where people can call up and register non-emergency incidents. And so, and then what it's trying to do is it's trying to basically gather up their identity, the issue that they had, whether they saw any suspects, etc. But you can see, it's just got this description of the personality of a calm professional voice agent. Your sole task is to do this. And then, there's this core behavior. And then we just say things literally like empathize and stay neutral, steady, reassuring tone, no judgment or legal advice, right? And so if you're sort of describing the character, right, that this person is talking to, the LLM will reflect that. And so I'll just share this one too. So there may be elements of that personality that you can just put into your own prompt.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that one,
Um,
has things like, anyways, there's other capabilities in there, but it's pretty good.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. One last two things, and I will be quickly to leave the floor for friends. I have changed the welcome message because it's about a lot of people are getting skeptical,
Mm,
colleagues at IOM, the fact that they want me to write that this chatbot cannot provide help in medical emergencies.
yeah.
So we are not responsible when someone is like really in a very critical situation and just the friend next to them is trying to get a solution from the chatbot. And I was thinking about if I can, I'm not sure if I can add an icon, like a warning icon within the welcome message, within the text, kind of like I don't know if
Yeah.
that's
You can definitely go ahead and
aesthetically good or not,
emojis.
but it's
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that, adding an emoji saying that, please, like a disclaimer, I cannot provide help in medical emergencies. Everyone was like, yeah, this is a critical point. You need to put it in at the welcome message. And then one last thing is about how can I activate the zero data retention?
Yeah, this is a
If
little longer.
uh,
It's a slightly more technical. Like
mm-hmm,
there's a set of API calls that you can make.
mm-hmm,
We and uh that basically that it's saying that, hey, when you make an API call, there's an additional flag that basically forgets that. Um,
mm-hmm.
in your case, there will be some trade-offs that we're gonna need because it's sort of like if you want to enable people to ask a follow-up question, you have to store that data somewhere. Um,
Makes sense.
and so right now, the zero data retention is sort of binary, which is either
Okay.
we store it or basically you make the call, we give back an answer, and then we erase everything that they said.
Okay.
My take is I don't think you actually want either. I think you probably want a hybrid approach where we
Mm-hmm,
are retaining the data for, say, a day so that they can
mm-hmm,
ask a follow-up question and we don't suddenly forget. Um, we have considered doing this. We haven't done that work. I would love to understand from your perspective, and frankly, also other folks here, like Rob, right? Like, what is the type of data retention that's going to work in this kind of hybrid sense that we think makes the most kind of the right trade-off before we sort of dive into the technical solution. Um, so I guess the favor that I would ask of you guys is if you could write to us with, legal concerns, ethical concerns, organizational concerns about like what is appropriate data retention for your scenarios. We'll try to aggregate all of that and then come back with, okay, this is what we think the actual solution looks like that respects it. Um, because they're all subtly different, we've found. And so, as I said, right now we're kind of binary, either remember things for a long time so that people can do these kind of follow-up conversations, or we forget a bunch of stuff immediately. And I feel like the right solution is a hybrid, which is going to require some work on our side.
clear. Yep. I will think about this and yeah, see what is the best solution, which is the best hybrid configuration that will be useful and also keep the chatbot as a better solution. Yeah, you don't want it
Yeah.
to
And
forget
then,
what. Yeah.
and then just to your earlier part about ensuring that you know, you have a warning, right? So like
Mhm.
this is the consent UI that we work with the Safaricom people. So this is a telco based out of Kenya that has this service called Mshuri that gives, you know, farming advice. And so, you know, this is an example where before it does anything, it's forcing them to basically hit this I agree button, right, for the consent portion. So this is this kind of warning state. You can also do things like send back a picture. So if you want to, you know, sort of decorate this up a little bit more, you know, that you can send a photo at the same time that you're sending this. And then this bot in particular, like, will not respond to any of your questions until you consent to its policies. And so if you feel like you're at that level legally, there's sort of ways to make that happen. And, you know, again, this recipe is public, and so you can kind of see, you know, how did they do that? What's the prompt magic that kind of makes that happen? I'll go share that one too.
Yes, please. This is what is. Yes, we need this. Yep.
Okay, great. So as I
Yeah.
said, it's mostly a matter of a little bit of prompt
Mhm.
engineering and then testing, right? And
Mhm.
so then your golden questions have to kind of reflect this too, so that, you know, that
Mhm.
we basically are catching all of the cases, and that's reflected in your regression testing. It does make it a little more complex, but it's possible.
Thank you so much. I'll leave the floor for more questions. Yep.
Shadi, I'm just curious so far, you know, how's it going for you? I think, you know, I feel like we've certainly talked a lot on these and we've heard from City of Seattle and seen some examples, but I'm curious for you and for Teach for India and Medtronics, like is it on target? Is it doing the things that you want?
From my side, nurses and doctors, like frontliners, are very happy. Just the management side are kind of like this. They're skeptical, you know, where there's two
It's
sides, you know.
appropriate.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have those innovators and conservers, and maybe the people. Some people are in between who are more pragmatic. But I will say some top management are very into the innovators side, and other ones are more um, terms and condition, data retention. How are we doing this? It's a workflow accelerator, and they're feeling like this is going really fast. But
It's called
I
an
keep pushing, you
accelerator.
know. Yeah, I keep pushing and saying that like the cohort is not waiting, guys. We need to test as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think it is, you know, it is interesting to, you know, it's it's such a new thing and it's such a different thing from regular types of projects, whether those are software projects or you know, sort of human human capital type projects where you don't necessarily know what to expect, and there's not there's no, you know, there's no baseline trust, but the frontline workers see it and they're like, wow, this is great. You know, Brooke and I were just talking about that yesterday, how, you know, for teachers, they'll take anything they can get that makes their lives a little bit easier, and they can deal with it being wrong 15% of the time. But Peter and I as software developers are like, it's wrong 15% of the time. That's not acceptable. That's a bad product. So, you know, it's just it's yeah, we found it really interesting. Sort of the different. It's a new experience for sure.
Yeah, it's strange. And then I do feel like and this is why, we spent the last week really thinking hard about evaluation, is given it is going to be wrong some percentage of the time, right? It's the statistical nature, unfortunately, of like how these things work. Being able to quantify that and see how bad that is with every change, every model update, etc., I think ends up being more important. And so yeah, that is the nature of the beast. And then like it's sort of like we all have to be in this world of like, okay, what is your risk tolerance, right? And if your risk tolerance is zero, then you really should use procedural code for a lot of these things. But if it's okay, right? But yeah, but you're right, Dan. It's totally different.
I was thinking about your evaluators, and I don't know if this is possible now if I forget. But when I run the eval and it comes back with the scores, and I see like something might be like a 0.8 or 0.6 or whatever, but when I read it, like it's probably more like a 0.4. Like, is there a way? Is that something that's coming where I can be like, no, this is actually 0.4 or whatever, and then that is like fed back into the system so that we can. So when it runs it again, if it's more like thing I said is 0.4, it's actually scored as 0.4 or something like that.
In short, yeah, we want to get there, and we can kind of
Mhm.
show the changes that we have been making lately. It's a good time for this portion of the demo. Um, so, to your point, let me bring this up. Is this it? Yes. So this was, give me 1 second, guys. I just want to sort of show you what we've been doing in the background and kind of like how we think about this problem. I have to go find the relevant sheet. So in particular, like part of it is, here we go. This is a good example. So like this is, I'm sure, something that you guys have looked at, right? Where this was the question, this is the answer, this is what the output for the first bot was, this is what the output for the second one was, this is its rationale, and this is the score. And then, to your point, Tom, you really want like another column of like feedback where you get to comment of, I thought output one was actually better, right?
Mhm.
Because, right? And so, I would say we don't have UI for this yet, but we have been doing this technique where we are basically creating like a Google Sheet of this, putting in our own feedback on the evaluator like this, and then feed all of that back into an O3 prompt that then says, please make this evaluator better.
Mhm.
And that is a reasonably effective way to like make the evaluator better. And then some of the stuff that's been coming out of that evaluation exercise that we did make a bunch of changes on here, and I'll kind of walk you through it, which is we just sort of rewrote the default evaluator so that, if you have the word answer or golden answer, it'll still do the right thing. And then we change the scoring a little bit, which is, and I think Rob Lloyd, this was a really big piece in the city of Seattle. We added in this thing, which is penalize answers
Mhm.
that hallucinate beyond the reference answer. So it's making things up that shouldn't
Mhm.
be in your golden answer. It now gets a much lower score. And then we
Mhm.
also made some changes where, basically it gets points for style, right? And so sometimes things will have the same semantic meaning, but one will be 4 paragraphs and one will be 1 sentence. And so we're trying to encourage it to also preserve that. And then that seems to be, as we've been going through and kind of like evaluating different evaluator schemes, this is like a better default. So we'll share this back out. But
Mhm.
the early results are, it seems to be giving much better, much, at least in our kind of early tests of our
Mhm.
default stuff. And then, like this is a pretty good example where I was just like, this is again using this thing. It's now pretty clearly saying that the one that's limited, that's basing its answers in our current one versus web search, we're getting the right thing. Where in the cases where web search was hallucinating and adding more stuff, it's getting the 0.4. And the one that's not, which is our most latest, is really getting what we consider a good answer. Um, and so, anyways, it's very much this. There's more coming on this, but
Mhm.
we know that this is very much an issue that needs to get better, and this is we get to sort of the next level of depth. And Gokul, and this, thank you so much for you and Rob, the other Rob Landis, for the feedback over the last 2 weeks. It's been motivating, basically, how do we really do this and kind of knock it out of the park. The one thing that I have seen over and over again, though, that I would just encourage all of you guys to do is the quality of your golden answers matters, right? And
Mhm.
so it really has to reflect what would you like the bot to say. And so I noticed in some of the cases where, it'll be like, who's the mayor? And then the golden answer should be like Mark Harnell. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your boss.
Bruce Harrell.
Bruce Harrell. Sorry. Wow, Bruce Harrell. So that is the answer. But, in this particular context, the bot has been instructed to say, and his telephone number is this, and his address is this, and would you like to transfer me now? Right? Because that's what we've told it. We've told it it's a system to transfer calls. So if your golden answer doesn't contain all that other stuff, right, and just contains this is the mayor's name, then it's actually going to penalize in the evaluator because it added these other things that you actually wanted there. So you have to think very carefully about what is the golden answer given the context of what you've told this thing to be. And so that's where, it's just you want to go over those things with a fine-tooth comb and then keep updating them, right, back and forth. And so that's just one thing that we've seen. And then the other little thing that I would, kind of point out, and I think we've mentioned this before, but if we're trying to make it clear, is you'll notice we usually have like the one sheet, which is here, and then we have different tabs, which represents like how long do we want to run this evaluator for. So when we're just like testing it quickly,
Mhm.
basically
Mhm.
just move this short one to the front. But if you do this action, where you're moving medium to the far left, when you run the bulk runner, it'll now do all 14 questions here, right? And then if you do full and then hit bulk run, it'll now do all 90 questions, right? And so this one may take an hour to basically get feedback on and see how it works. Whereas if you do it just 3, it'll take 30 seconds.
Mhm.
And so this is kind of our process as we're going through testing that just makes this faster, which is have a good big set of questions, but do your testing on just like 2 or 3 at a time, where you're sort of fixing everything up and then kind of swap in these other tabs to do the full testing range.
Yeah.
On this subject,
Yeah.
I was sorry, I'm talking over somebody.
No, this is Gokul. I was just going to add on to what you're saying, Sean, about this context is the challenge is that we to find that balance. We actually find a lot of the information helpful, even though it may not be the exact golden answer verbatim. The the um, the issue we face here is that um, the risk, or we also open it up to being, hacked or misused. And so it's kind of finding that balance between how do we get the most relevant answer for that question without going way far off or without opening it up to make it vulnerable for easier attacks, essentially. But we also spoke with some of our our UX group
Yeah.
in terms of how we should approach this. In the sense, what are we trying? What are we trying to solve for the customer here?
Yeah.
So from that lens, we should only make it better and not worse, right? So I think there is there's a lot of value here, and I think it also ties back to that data retention that you were discussing earlier. Um, I think that's definitely something that we will want to dig more as well. So we have a few requirements, but we can send that over, and then if you're able to consolidate from others too, then we can have either common, feedback or individually, whichever works for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as I said, if you can send that over, we'll collate it and sort of we have some early thoughts from other conversations we've had of like what the plan should be, but I want to make sure that we've got all of the requirements into before we kind of dig into that. There are other things that are, available now that we had as one of the agenda items, which is, if you want to push all of the data back to your own BI system and then kind of delete it on our end immediately, that's something that, we can do today, right? And so, if that basically in this scenario, every time there's a new caller, you can optionally look up in your own system. Like you can basically take their telephone number, hash it to a GUID, look up in your own system, do I have a record for this person, return that data, have the thing process and answer. And then at the end of this call or SMS, then take all of that data, write it back to your own system, and then, effectively delete everything that's on GUI. And so that basically creates a situation where there's no state that's then managed on our side. And basically all of the state is happening via these little functions at the beginning and the end where it's being recorded on your end. And you can do via code a transformation where you're stripping all of the PII data before it goes back to your side too. So that's a technique that a couple other customers have done to date. But it's more work because you're essentially managing the conversation history with your own database on your side rather than us. But it is possible today. And then, before I was going to ask all of you to sort of repeat that work, I wanted to see if there's some hybrid scenario where we can do more of the heavy lifting sort of centrally. So,
and right now the data dump that the capability that you're able to integrate with the workflow is through like REST API calls externally,
yeah,
or like a
exactly.
but you can do like a Boto 3 package and connect to an S3 resource or anything like that on AWS, for example. So it doesn't get more complex, I assume.
There's two ways to do it. So one is it's just a post function, right? Where it's basically got all of the conversation, and then you can run then any JavaScript or Python code with secrets. And so you can just store that to a bucket then. Or there's another thing that just runs at the end of the day that can also just push data anywhere you like. So I can just show you that. Maybe that's easier to see
Yeah,
rather
I
than
saw this in the Sun City example. I think they're posting that to that Airtable.
Yeah, so that's just like an Airtable example. But then and that's only happening when they've collected all the data that they need. But it's sort of similar to that. You could just say at the end of every conversation, please write to this place that I've got. And so then it's the little bit of connecting code that's needed is, the bot will essentially push a JSON object of the whole conversation and everything that was exchanged, and then your code can do whatever you want and then push that to your own server. And so that's the little bit of connective tissue that you would do to then write to your S3 bucket if you want. And then the other thing, just so you guys are aware, I don't know if you've seen this option. So if you, too many windows, sorry. So if you go to say the Seymour bot here and you go to integrations and you go to the voice, you'll see down at the bottom, there's this, where did I go? I could have sworn. Where's our little thing that basically says at the end of the day we send all this stuff? Why am I missing this?
It's
Uh,
inside the analytics
oh, it's in
dashboard.
analytics. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
The
forgot.
cron job, right?
Yeah, it's the cron job.
Yeah.
So in your analytics piece, which may not be the best place to put this UI, at the very bottom here, there's this export option. So at the end of the day, we basically can say, please run this other function, and then it will pass in this export function URL. And then you can just take that file and do whatever you want. And so basically, Oops, that's not what I want. So we'll give you a better example of this, but this is just a cron job that runs at the end of the day that basically just takes all of these messages that you see here and then can export them back to you. So this whole table of interactions plus the analysis scripts that you run that you see here is then pushed back to you at the end of the day if you want to sort of hook this up to your own BI system. So
I
it's
have a doc on this in the chat. I just put it in the chat.
did the questions get answered that were in the chat?
The thought that I had been
Peter, I think you just cut out.
no, I was waiting for a response on that. So the thought that I had been, is my audio not working?
Correct. Your audio is not working.
Hello? Testing.
We're hearing about 60% of your words, Peter.
Can you hear me now?
Was there another? Yes.
All right. Is that it seems as though another column for scoring criteria might actually be valuable as well, if there's a way to implement something like that. The idea being that here's a golden answer, but here are actually the relevant pieces we'd like to be able to get from that.
Yeah, so on that eval side, the evaluator is totally configurable. And so if I go back to, I'll go back to, I'll use you guys in as example here because it's the most recent one that we've been working on. If I take like the bulk run for the city of Seattle, while this thing loads, there we go. And so you'll notice here, it's got this evaluation part, Peter. And so this is the actual script that you can configure. So most people will just use the default Copilot evaluator, but you can make a new one and sort of fork it and save it as a saved run like anything else. And then you'll notice this is your evaluator. So this is where you can change the definition to whatever you want.
Did Peter mean like human marking on top of it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I misunderstood your question. But this is where you would change the evaluation criteria for your particular context. And it's literally just like this is the default, but you could say this is really for teachers and, answers that, or I don't know, whatever you want to do to change that evaluation criteria, this is where it's defined.
Yeah, I mean, last year or something, we did one for a content moderation piece for that wiki kind of a project, and they wanted to segregate between stuff that was like quote unquote appropriate for kids versus not. So when we added that in the eval instructions, it was able to kind of sense that a little bit better. And then, as you said, Tom, the ones that you find that don't seem to be scoring really well, I think it's just like I always keep saying, it's just like having another like counterpart in your team. Like once you see their work, you can give them feedback. So then the feedback goes back as a prompt instruction. And usually it's able to then, I mean, there's no like history to it, but at least it's able to kind of understand and make those distinctions a little bit more discerning than if it's just a generic evaluator. So,
Did that
Bala,
answer
would you?
Sure.
Yeah, that's what I also assume, that it's more like a human scoring on top. I think, is that what you're saying, Peter? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so the answer is right now, for this kind of as Tom was saying, I would just do that in a Google Sheet and say, and then save that. And then we can send you, maybe we'll send you guys a little Loom video of like how to take that Google Sheet and then run it in another prompt so that basically hopefully then have it automatically improve the evaluator. But that process is a little hokey right now because you're sort of cutting and pasting between various LLM creations. And I do want to integrate this latest eval script, which I think is frankly better than the current one that we've got. So I want to integrate that before I send you this how-to example.
On
I was
the
wondering if, sorry,
so go ahead.
it's okay, Vakul, if once you're done, maybe it would be good for Bala also to just share what they're doing at Teach for India as well. That's still left. Yeah. Go ahead,
Um,
Vakul.
yeah, I was going to add to like the testing from a audio or voice perspective. Um, the the I don't know, the vocal response we get, and how good or bad that is. Is there a way to automate that
Yes.
in a way?
So one of the things that we do a lot in terms of evaluating different language models to see how well they understand people, and to understand local users. And so like this is if you go to Gooey.AI/language, this is basically a tool where we can evaluate of all of the competing ASR and in different models, which actually understand this audio the best and basically transform, what you see here, just two pieces of audio into the golden transcription, which is in Chichewa, and this golden translation, right? And so the only difference is you're just sort of putting in a link to your audio piece. And then if you come down here in the columns, you'll see somewhere in here, there's a thing that you're basically you're mapping this audio column to the audio to in your Copilot evaluator, you would just map it to rather than I think it's prompt.input or text, you would map it to the audio input. So in short, the process is the same. You're basically making a Google Doc or an Office 365 document that looks like this, right? That says, here's my audio, here's the transcription, here's the translation. And then in your case, if you want the answer as text that should be returned, you would put that in here too. And then you just sort of reconfigure the sort of mapping in your Copilot and then do it. And so you can basically have audio as input rather than just text as input, Google. And so this Shoddy, I think, did this for his WhatsApp folks in common questions. And you're sort of just same process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Uh,
But our manual, I don't know, our experience so far, it has some like we don't find. I think the response we get for in a in a in a language other than English seems to be not the same. In terms of the constraints that we put in place versus what we get from it. And then also the initial, it takes a couple of conversations or for the bot to recognize that language and start responding in that language. And based on my manual testing experience, that's kind of what I've seen. Um,
Yeah,
and
so I guess the two thoughts I'd have there is one, getting those specific audio samples understood, right? And sort of into a regression framework is going to be helpful. And then two, there might be some prompting that we should consider for you guys, which is rather than just expecting that people immediately start speaking their issue, that you could have a first prompt, which is please tell me your language. And maybe you say that in a variety of different ones. And so we've seen that work better. And then you're sort of giving it the hint that, hey, you really should be trying to recognize in this language rather than listening for all of them. So sometimes that yields better results too. To basically make language selection somewhat explicit at the beginning to hopefully aid recognition afterwards. I will say right now, the IVR stuff over voice is predominantly on that GPT-4o model, which is frankly, I think supports 40 different languages. And so we have other models that will basically support many more languages, but there's some real-time versus not real-time trade-offs that you have to make there, right? Things like interruption, right, don't work as well. So you sort of have to, it's a bigger kind of architecture change, right? If we want to support all of those other models, the conversation and latency will increase, from a second, 2 seconds to like 5. And so that's another trade-off that you kind of have to consider as you're thinking about this.
Yep. I experienced the same. Yep.
Yeah. Did we get all of the other things answered in the chat going back and forth? Rob Lloyd, you had asked about how about negatives? Did that get answered?
You're talking about low things scoring lower if they were less full or inaccurate. And I said, how about scoring negative? So I was just joking.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just an arbitrary number range. We just figured 0 to 1. 0 to 1 is easy and
Yeah.
consistent.
No, I tried it once. I did minus 0 and 1, and the LLM just didn't do so well.
Yeah.
on getting it.
I'm an Asian mother, so
I mean,
there's right, and then there's you're dead to me.
yeah. Honestly, though, this is a good example where it's better to lean into what are scoring systems that are commonly found on the internet, right? It will do a better job with that of 0 to 1 or 0 to 10 rather than a scale of like 0 to 15, which isn't commonly found on the internet. It's just not gonna, in its statistical model of the world, do as well on those things. Like the internet is filled with examples of 0 to 1 and 0 to 10. It's other numbering schemes for evaluation are not as common. So don't do that.
I had a question. So something that just came up, right? We were just going to start our pilot with a set of users, and we're working with teachers primarily who we are hoping are going to ask the bot questions regarding classroom scenarios or something they're facing in the classroom, and get guidance from the bot, which comes out of our knowledge base that we have collated over the years. But something that came up was, can the bot remember the context of a particular user and sort of build on that the next time they come back with a question? Let's say I am a grade 5 teacher and I've asked something around classroom culture, and the bot's given me some suggestions to try out. And the next time I've come back, can it sort of just ask me like, how did that go? Or remember that I'm a grade 5 teacher with so many students, and sort of not have me repeat that every time. Yeah, so that was just something that we were thinking about.
Yeah, on that one, there's sort of two answers, which is one, by default, I think we've set the conversation memory by default for everyone here at the last 50 interactions. And so it will remember the last 50 back and forth that the person has had. And so, and then hence, in terms of asking follow-up questions, it's then just a prompt change for you, which is
Okay.
you can just put in there, which is, hey, if you've given advice before and the user hasn't responded to that in 4 questions, ask them, how did that go? Right?
Mhm.
And so you can just try testing that as one piece. And then, but 50 is not infinite. And so that
Okay.
memory will age out. And hence,
Mhm.
there is another feature request, which ChatGPT has, for example, which is it actually stores a separate summarized document of key facts that it wants to remember about you in this conversation. And that is memory. And so that one's also reasonably high up on the product backlog. And so, and does unlock a lot of things, which then would remember things like, oh, you're a fifth grade teacher.
Yeah.
In your case, the other thing that I would strongly suggest, and I feel like many of you have this, is you can, as a pre-function, pull data from your internal system and basically, shove that into the prompt. So given this telephone number or given this user ID in the case of Open Up, if you have a profile about that person and they're logged in and you know their district and you know their name and you know their subject, you could just push that in and say, as a little JavaScript object that you looked up, and then the prompt just has that. And that's kind of like you guys doing the memory things rather than us doing the memory. And we've seen other people follow that pattern too. But Bala, this kind of automatic memory, we'll sort of take that as another vote to upvote that on our side. And
That
and
would be great.
would be, yes, that would basically allow you guys not to have to code anything, and that sort of you get for free. And then there would probably be another little function, which is if the user says something about their profession that you really think is worth remembering, please write it to this thing. And then by default, we would read from that little text document that we're writing and append that to the prompt. So you would be able to see that memory as well. So, but that doesn't exist yet. So, but it's something that you're about the fourth organization to ask for.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I mean, I think +1 to what Gokul has shared. Probably blocking numbers. I mean, you're aware of what happened with
Yes.
what's number. So yeah, that would also be something that would be great.
Yep. We'll share this after the call, but we are maintaining a kind of request list that comes from all of you guys.
I thought I'll just remind everyone to fill the Google form and I put it back in the chat. I hope it's accessible. Or maybe for city team, do we need another format? If they can't do Google form, or is that okay? Rob, Gokul, are you guys okay for a Google form or?
Yeah, for the city of Seattle folks, can you fill out a public Google form?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Just the feedback process in a formalized way. If you'd like to be anonymous, you can, but it just helps us improve. And so we really would appreciate you guys. I think it's like 7 questions.
Just I'll just mark my name as Dan Blaker.
There you go. I think we asked for your cohort, not your name in that thing.
I'll
No, I
mark
did
mine.
add name. You can just say anonymous or Ambika.
And then Peter, on your RAG piece, I feel like let's just do a session because I know we've been trying to do this stuff back and forth, but I feel like a session with you and Dave would help. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of RAG, and frankly, given the size, there's a lot of different paths to basically make that good. And I just think it would be helpful for you and he to stick your heads together on it. Okay.
We're also
Bye.
considering a spike to build one out on our own side and just like throw a vector database together with an API endpoint and
Yes.
see what we can get out of it, and then just have that be part of our workflow.
Yep.
So that's another thing we sort of talked about it a little bit, and so we'll see.
Yeah, sure. That's another certainly reasonable possibility. And then you would just expose that as a function, right? That it can call and say, hey, when you need to look up data, do this.
Yeah. And then assuming it returns JSON, we'll just be able to access the data in those JSON results, right? So
yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'll say is the trickiness is one, we've often found that you need a synthetic data process to supplement your data. So basically, for each web page that's in there, you might need to create a FAQ, right? So that when you do a query, it basically finds the question and it's more likely to hit that. And then, how it creates that synthetic data is itself, part of it. And then all that goes into the vector. The other tuning that you need to think through, and so, we have a synthetic data process that you can also use for these things in there, but that was a big lift. And then especially if you're dealing with PDFs, like how do you make that synthetic data? Because you have to understand the visual structure of each document, of each page, create chunks for it, deal with the chunks. And then there are kind of different search techniques you can use of, dense versus sparse embeddings. Like I would just say it's probably worth a conversation. Like there's like literally a year and a half of effort
Yeah.
to basically make that. And so I'm happy to give you the insights that we found at the end of it, but
Yeah.
more complex. I mean, it's search, right? Like search is a big, hairy space.
Yeah, and I think the only reason why we are considering it even a possibility is just because like you had to build a general purpose knowledge base,
and it definitely. And
we
so
have to build one that searches,
exactly
consistently structured lesson pages, basically.
Yeah. And so it may be better. I don't think it's a crazy idea. I just want to sort of give you some of the bumps we encountered so you don't have to encounter the same bumps.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So we'll set that up. We also have another engineer on our team who's very interested in starting to get into this stuff. So we'll see what we can find. So should we try to get it on your calendar or Dave's or?
Oh, on that one, you go ahead and just do Dave. I'm traveling next week. He can take it.
Sounds good.
I think on that point, Dan, I think it's it would help if anyone in the participants, you could kind of explore how this maps or scales into an enterprise AI strategy. I think that would, any pointers or insights there would be definitely helpful.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate by what you mean there, Gokul?
We like for example, we may have we have several use cases where we can make use of some augmented capability. Let's say data silos and redundancies is an example of how we can how an experience like this and certain iterations of this, if you will, may get us to achieving some of those challenges, some real life enterprise challenges, which we see in a lot of legacy environments. Or in our case, we have 44 different departments. And we don't have volume of data, like we're like an inch deep but a mile wide type enterprise. So like how do we kind of solve some of those challenges? Basically use this as a launch pad, and what would be that potential growth path for us.
Yeah, my only small intuition is, it's like if everything is exposed in some central way, as like, here's how you get to that data, here's the interfaces that are associated with it, and then you describe those, then suddenly, every AI agent, if it has appropriate permissions, can then go and interact with that data. And that seems useful at a larger level as you begin to make out many different bots that may have many different access needs. Yeah, but I could see something like that. But the management of that seems like it's going to get hairy, and permissions and all those other things seem like they may get hard in time.
Yeah, a direct use case would be how we can like mature a data hub or a data sharing environment, like using this AI as some kind of a productivity boost for users rating the quality of data instead.
Okay, we're a little over. I would just say, reminder, please fill out the survey. If you need us and want to schedule time, Ambika's calendar and my calendar are always open. Gokul, I think we were trying to get a thing later on today. And so just before, I'd love to sort of knock out some of those issues. And then Bala, thank you for coming. I would love to do a meet with your wider team in an easy time zone next week.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
John.